Thomas want to go to bed.
What does it mean, she asked.
Daddy
Is it another
reading the
language?
story.
It's tortoise language, Mr. Hoppy said. Tortoises are very backward creatures. Therefore, they can only understand words that are written
Kalau mau
backwards.
tidur, minta dibacain
That's obvious, isn't it?
story bapaknya
I
dia.
suppose so, Mrs. Silver said, bewildered. SCO trot is simply tortoise spelled backwards, Mr. Hoppy said. Look at it. So it is, Mrs. Silver said. The other words are spelled backwards too. Mr. Hoppy said, if you can turn them round into human language, they simply say, tortoise, tortoise, get bigger, come on, tortoise, grow up, puff up, shoot up, spring up, blow up, swell up, gorge, guzzle, stuff, gulp, put on fat, tortoise, put on fat, get on, gobble food. I'll try it, Mrs. Silver said. I'll try anything. Of course I will, but I can't believe it will work. You wait and see, Mr. Hoppy said, smiling at her. Magic spell. Mr. Hoppy tells Mrs. Silver that his spell has magic powers. If you could cast a magic spell, what would it be? Abracadabra, alakazam. The secret plan. One day after Mrs. Silver had gone to work, Mr. Hoppy went out onto his balcony armed with a long metal pole. He called this his tortoise catcher. He leaned over the balcony railings and lowered the pole down onto Mrs. Silver's balcony below. Alfie was basking in the pale sunlight over to one side. Hello, Alfie, Mr. Hoppy said. You're about to go for a little ride. He wiggled the tortoise catcher till it was right above Alfie. He pushed the hand lever so that the claws opened wide. Then he lowered the two claws neatly over Alfie's shell and pulled the lever. The claws closed tightly over the shell like two fingers of a hand. He hauled Alfie up onto his own balcony. It was easy. Now holding Alfie in one hand, he picked his way carefully through the huge collection of tortoises he had bought from pet shops all over the city to find one that first of all had the same colour shell as Alfie's and secondly weighed exactly 2 ounces more. When he had selected the perfect tortoise, Mr. Hoppy took tortoise number 2 out onto the balcony and gripped it in the claws of the tortoise catcher. Then he lowered it onto Mrs. Silver's balcony, right beside a nice fresh lettuce. Out onto her balcony swept Mrs. Silver. Alfie, my darling, she cried out. Mummy's back. Have you missed me? Mr. Hoppy, peering over his railings, but well hidden between two huge potted plants, held his breath. The new tortoise was still chomping away at the lettuce. My, Alfie! You do seem hungry today, Mrs. Silver was saying. It must be Mr. Hoppy's magic words. I've been whispering to you. Mr. Hoppy watched as Mrs. Silver picked up the tortoise and stroked his shell. Then she fished Mr. Hoppy's piece of paper out of her pocket and holding the tortoise very close to her face, she whispered, reading from the paper. SCO trot, teg regib. Emok no, SCO trot, wog poo, fup poo, touche poo, nerps poo, wolb poo, clues poo, grog, elzug, futs plug, tup no taff, SCO trot, tup no taff, teg no, elbog doof. Alfie grows even bigger. Mr. Hoppy waited 7 whole days before he made his next move. On the afternoon of the 7th day, when Mrs. Silver was at work, he lifted tortoise number 2 from the balcony below and brought it into his living room. Tortoise number 2 had weighed exactly 15 ounces. He must now find one that weighed exactly 17 ounces, 2 ounces more. From his enormous collection, he easily found a 17-ounce tortoise, and he made sure the shells matched in colour. Then he lowered tortoise number 3 onto Mrs. Silver's balcony. As you have guessed by now, Mr. Hoppy's secret was a very simple one. If a creature grows slowly enough, I mean very, very slowly indeed, then you will never notice that it has grown at all. especially if you see it every day. It's the same with children. They are actually growing taller every week, but their mothers never notice it until they grow out of their clothes. Slowly does it, Mr. Hoppy told himself. Don't hurry. So this is how exactly things went on over the next 8 weeks. In the beginning, Alfie weighed... How much did he weigh? 13 ounces. End of the first week, tortoise number 2 weighed 15 ounces. End of the second week, tortoise number 3 weighed 17 ounces. No. End of the third week, tortoise number 4 weighed 19 ounces.